Hello, my name is Rachel Mariano, and I'm the Director of Student Life at Gwinnett Tech. On behalf of Student Life, welcome. We are so glad that you have joined us today for this session of putting the pro in professional. We're thrilled to have our speaker here today and to introduce her as one of our amazing students. He's in our respiratory care program, and he also is one of our finalists of our Georgia Occupational Award of Leadership. So please join me in welcoming Antonio Gentil.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. So to introduce Monica, Monica Kaufman Pearson is the first woman and the first minority to anchor the daily evening news in Atlanta, Georgia, where she worked for 37 years at the leading station WSB-TV. She won 33 Southern Regional and local Emmy Awards for reporting, anchoring, and her close-up celebrity interview shows. When she retired in 2012, she was honored on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives by the bipartisan delegation of the state of Georgia for her years of service on and off the air to improve the lives of the citizens of Georgia. Monica calls retirement rewirement, and now she does voiceover work for KISS 104.1. She serves as one of three co-hosts for the Emmy-nominated Georgia Public Broadcasting TV show, a personal favorite of mine, A Seat at the Table. She is a spokesperson for businesses and institutions on radio and television, and she serves as a speaker and MC for events. She is in several halls of fame: the National Association of Black Journalists, the University of Kentucky Journalism, the Georgia Association of Broadcasters, the Atlanta Press Club, the Georgia Music and National Black Hall Radio of Fame, and in 2019, she was inducted into the Trumpet Foundation International Civil Rights Walk of Fame, located outside the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta. Monica is a native of Louisville, Kentucky, and earned her bachelor's from the University of Louisville and a master's from the University of Georgia, where she graduated magna cum laude. She has been a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority since 1966. Monica is married to John E. Pearson Sr., has a daughter, Claire Patrice DeVoe, and a stepson, John E. Pearson II. So everyone, please give me a warm welcome and join me in welcoming Monica Kaufman Pearson.
Thank you, Antonio. Very nice of you. And thank you all for welcoming me. I'm very happy to be here to talk about the pro in professional. So, somebody wrote that every job is a self-portrait of the person who did it. Autograph your work with excellence. Now, I don't know who first wrote that, but I do know it's true. The questions for you today are simple. Does your work speak for itself, and what is the message it sends? Now, being a professional is more than wearing the right suit and having a title. You must be a professional no matter your title, your job description, or attire. In other words, wherever you are right now, you are a professional. So, how do you see what you do every day? Is it your job, your career, or your calling? Your answer determines how you go about autographing your work. All right. The JOB goal, the job goal is just to put in 40 hours a week to earn a paycheck and no more. Author Robert Bellah, who wrote Habits of the Heart, says those of you seeing yourself in a career can easily trace your progress through various appointments and achievements. Now, Bella believes the true pro sees what they do as a calling. Bella defines it this way: the ideal blending of activity and character that makes work inseparable from life. Now, I ask you, is this something you do because you love it? Is it something you're going to do because you love it? Something you would do even with a cut in pay? Something that is not a four-letter word to you, and that four-letter word is work. Now, this may just be an interim position right now you're in until you get what you earn, but habits formed here in school, in your current workplace, will set the stage for later. So what's your attitude? Do you still exhibit that just hired attitude? Now, I want you to think back when you were first hired for whatever job your first job was, or the position you're in now. Do you remember the excitement in getting that job, getting the call? You plotted your way to work so you wouldn't be late. You laid out your clothes the night before. You prepared for what you thought the day might bring. As a seasoned professional now, what is your attitude about what you do? Now, remember, professional is not about clothes or title. How has your attitude changed from just hired to aiming to get fired? Now, a former Atlanta public school administrator wrote something that I love. Beverly Johnson wrote an article entitled How to Get Fired. And here are some of her guaranteed methods to get fired. Always be late to work. Be absent every few days, especially on Friday, to get a good start on the weekend, and on Monday to recuperate from the weekend. Make long personal phone calls on business time. You know, you got that cell phone right where you need it. Be aloof and standoffish as though you are too good for this crummy place. Be obsessed with payday, living for that alone. Always watch the clock and know the exact number of minutes until quitting time. Whine a lot and ask for too much help from your supervisor or coworkers. Fail to follow explicit instruction, even though you know you can do it better your way. Cheat, pretend to do work that you're not doing, gripe constantly. And make sure you're involved in everybody's business. And don't forget to pass all that gossip and those rumors around. Get angry when asked to do something over again, especially if you goofed up. Pretend to know more than you really know. Look for personal insult in every comment directed toward you. If you follow this outline, you will be a success as a failure, and you'll get fired. While the professional employee or associate simply understands what habits to have in place and to come naturally in order to be a pro. You know what you do. You are always on time, punctual. You have a very positive attitude. You exhibit self-control and you think before you speak. You're always self-confident, believing in yourself, but also you're able to identify your problems and faults. You know, you take those lemons and turn them into lemonade. You make efforts to turn negatives into pluses. You are honest and loyal and committed to whatever you do. You're truthful in your dealings. You literally live by a set of rules that are ethical. Now, my husband, who is the chief deputy for Henry County Sheriff's Office, says to all of his employees, we only have one rule. We follow all the rules. As a professional, your self-confidence also is shown through how you dress for your position. Now, some of you may wear a uniform, but do you take pride in how you look and how you represent your company, even on the phone? Are you dedicated, determined, and dependable? Now, I know I borrowed a phrase from one of my former television competitors, but are you dedicated, determined, and dependable every day? Remember, as Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. In other words, how you work tells who you are, and that speaks to your character. Now, if you are a professional, you're looking forward to being in a leadership position, and that means you set the example for others. You have a positive and realistic attitude. You always exhibit self-control and self-confidence. You're honest and loyal, a good communicator. And when you're in a leadership position, you have a keen eye and ear and are aware of job stresses that take people's eyes off the goal, the mission. Oh, and let's talk about that for a minute. The mission. You have to make sure you define that mission and that goal and everyone's place in it. Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. No clear vision, no clear job description, the worst things in the world for an employee. Also, when you become a leader, you must remember what it was like to be in the trenches. A great or aspiring leader watches the language that they use. What seems like a problem that can't be solved is really an opportunity in disguise, a challenge that requires teamwork and harnesses ideas that comes from the diversity within. Yes, a leader must make sure that the workforce mirrors the ever-changing society. So you as a professional, you as a leader or future leader must embrace diversity to grow. But let's go back to language. There must be open communication and it must be encouraged. When there is criticism, it must be constructive to build up and not destructive to tear down. You can criticize an idea only if you truly have a better way of doing it and can prove it. My mama used to say, empty cans make the most noise. You can dissect an idea without doing an autopsy on the person who came up with the idea. I love what Sim Coliner, a media executive, wrote about leadership, professionalism, and the importance of your choice of words. He wrote, the 6 most important words are, I admit I made a mistake. The 5 most important words are, you did a good job. The 4 most important words, what's your opinion? The 3 most important words, if you please. The 2 most important words, thank you. The 1 most important word, we. And the least most important word, I. Those of you who are leaders or prepare yourself to be leaders should always invest in yourself and the people around you. You should always provide opportunities for growth, whether it's going back to school, continuing education, or seminars in the workplace. Now, I went back to grad school at the age of 65. Yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks. Mary McLeod Bethune said it best. Always invest in the human soul. Who knows? It might be a diamond in the rough. I also like what Jack Welch said. He was the former head of General Electric. He said, before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is about growing others. So a professional, a leader, because you're a leader no matter where you are in your career. A leader builds morale and makes sure everyone cooperates rather than compete, respects ideas and allows people to do the job, resolves conflicts quickly and effectively. The leader builds in fun, pressure releasers, where it's an ice cream social, softball team, anything allows people to see each other in another light. Even when you work with folks, sometimes you need to go out on entertainment with them so you get to know them in a different way. There are so many leadership attributes that I've come up with an acronym, and I'll break it down in its simplest form. Leadership spelled out literally. Took me a while to come up with this, but I did. L in leadership, lead purposefully. Max Lucado wrote, a man who wants to lead the orchestra must sometimes turn his back on the crowd. E, energize. Energize the people around you. A, anticipate and act. Don't always react. Be bold. D, define who you are and whose you are and the path to be taken. E, educate yourself and all around you. R, and this is for some of you who have come back to school, or maybe you've worked a long time in a position and you've decided, I'll stay here another 20 years, but maybe you should listen to R, resign and retire. Know when it's your time to go. Don't stifle someone else's growth or force them to leave because they can't move into a leadership position because you're staying too long. I took my own advice when I retired from WSB in 2012. I could have stayed longer, was even offered a longer contract, but that would have meant Jovita Moore would have had to stay in a subordinate position until I dropped dead on the set. That was no good for her, nor for me. So a real leader knows when to move, or resign or retire. S in leadership. Share the praise, but don't share the blame for failures or mistakes. You are the leader, so the buck stops with you. H, handle. Now remember, you don't handle or manage people. You handle and manage things. Walmart founder Sam Walton said, outstanding leaders go out of their way to boost the self-esteem of their personnel. If people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they can accomplish. The I in leadership, inspire by setting an example and understanding the 10 paradoxical commandments by Dr. Keith M. Keith. These were written in 1968, but they are still relevant. He wrote, people are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today, it'll be forgotten tomorrow, but do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and the smallest women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need to help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. And the last leadership trait in the word leadership starts with a P. And that P stands for peace. Peace is what you bring to the table, to the room, to the team. No stir in the pot, just purpose, just purpose, just purpose, just peace, just peace. Please remember, all you need to be a good leader is the word itself, leadership. Now it's time for me to get personal with you. Are you the best you can be by taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually? A pro knows how to set limits for themselves. A pro knows how to say no for self-protection. I've gotten two phrases that I use often when people come to me and ask me to do things. When I am stretched to the end and know I cannot take one more thing on my plate. And when that person says something to me like, well, as the first Black person to do this, we really need you. And what I normally say, if I drop dead tomorrow, who would you ask? Put things in perspective. I'm not always going to be here. The other thing I say to people who are my friends who are asking me to do things, what part of NO don't you understand? And to those friends of mine who always call me at the last minute to do things, my simple line is for self-protection. And emergency on your part does not create emergency on mine. You got to learn how to say no for your own health. Understand that sometimes people don't think before they act. So just be calm and say no. Don't let them guilt you into doing something you know that's not best for you or your family or for your brand. Because if you do something and you don't do it well, they're not going to talk about how they bullied you into doing it. They're just going to talk about, she wasn't as good as she usually is. So always, to be your best, protect yourself. The good leader understands they cannot be all things to all people. And that's the hardest lesson for us to learn. The leader understands how, and the professional understands how to prioritize work and at home. if you're always trying to be perfect, you're going to be perfectly crazy and stressed out. So, some of Monica's hints to all of you on this line. I don't want anyone to raise their hand, but how many of you take your phone into the restroom? And how many of you feel like you can't let a call just go? Those of you who have children, how often do you go in and make the bed over for them because it isn't just right? Learn to live with your child making that messy bed, leaving their room a mess, because guess what? You're teaching them responsibility for their actions. If the room is so junky and they can't find that favorite thing they want, they can't blame you. Make sure you have rules that you consistently stick to. Because if you do that, you are preparing them to be professionals. And last but not least, please stop trying to be perfect. Delegate, delegate, delegate. And the other thing that we women have the hardest thing doing, ask for help when you need it. That's not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. Learn to say help. The professional, the pro, understands self-preservation, but understands one more thing. The pro needs to be active in the community. It's called volunteerism. What you do for others is not only good for your self-advancement within the company you work for, but it's also great for self-enhancement. You feel really good when you do something for someone else. When you get out of yourself to help make life better for someone less fortunate. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Remember when you needed a hand? Remember when someone volunteered to help you? My mother always said, we succeed not for ourselves, but to improve the lives of others. Mama Hattie always told me, Monty, you have to reach back, pull up, and push forward. And you do it not for the praise, because you might not get thanked, but for the betterment of society. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. Volunteerism is a way to try out new skills. It's a way to help others. It's a way to feel good and be active in the community. And you can always recognize a pro, no matter where you go, even in the world of volunteerism. Do you know the difference between a pro and a loser? Well, someone wrote the difference between the two, and it's called The Difference. I do not know the name of the author, have never been able to find it, but I love it. It's called The Difference. A pro says, let's find out. A loser says, nobody knows. When a pro makes a mistake, the pro says, I was wrong. But the loser makes a mistake and says, wasn't my fault. A pro isn't nearly afraid of losing as a loser is secretly afraid of winning. A pro works harder than a loser and has more time. A loser is always too busy to do what's necessary. You know, they're always procrastinating. A pro goes through a problem, a loser goes around it and never gets past it. A pro makes commitments. The loser just makes promises. A pro says, I'm good, but not as good as I ought to be. A loser says, I'm not as bad as a whole lot of other people. A pro listens. A loser just waits until it's their turn to speak. A pro feels responsible for more than his or her job and community. A loser says, you know, I just work here. I only live there. So now let's get personal. In order to be successful, and I know that's what all of you want to be, there are ideas that you need to, as my mother always said, blow out of your mind. Now, these are not my original ideas. These come from Dealey Fenton and Associates. It's an agency that work to help women succeed in the workplace. But their ideas are wonderful for everyone. They came up with a list of things that they said hold people back. And they say if you hold any of these irrational or erroneous ideas, then you're never going to be the professional you want to be. So today is the day to let these erroneous ideas, if you hold any of them, to push them out of your life. Now, I'm not going to read the whole list. I'm just going to give you a few. I feel the way I feel because other people and events cause me to feel this way. Other people give me feedback as to whether I'm good or bad, and I can't feel good about myself unless they give me constant approval. And aside here, former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Will you please stop consenting? Other irrational or erroneous ideas. My parents treated me badly, so I'm always going to have problems in my emotional life. Everybody's got to love or respect me. You must be perfect in everything that I do, so don't take any chances with something because I might fail. Another aside here. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Henry Ford put it another way. One who fears failure limits his worth. Failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. In other words, you learn from your mistakes. And another erroneous and irrational idea, people should be fair and giving at all times. You know that's not going to happen, but you'd be surprised at how many people really feel that way and are blindsided when it doesn't happen. Dilling Fenton also took another step to help people understand you do have some basic human rights that we often forget. Your basic human rights, you have a right to refuse a request without feeling guilty. Remember back there when I told you you can say no? You have a right to feel and express anger in an appropriate way. Ladies, you know that saying you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar? Sometimes you got to use vinegar. You have the right to compete and achieve. There's nothing wrong with you wanting to be the next president of the United States, and no one can stop you. Barack Obama wouldn't have been president had he believed what many told him. Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer, would have never been governor and president had he listened to what others told him. You have the right to achieve. You have a right to make mistakes. You have a right to have your opinions heard and respected. You have a right to be treated as a capable adult and not to be patronized. Your needs are just as important as those of others. And you have a right to be independent and sometimes dependent. In other words, you have a right to be your best self, no matter what stage of life you're in right now. Now, I've shared an awful lot with you today, but I'm going to leave you with what I call how I keep the pro in my professional life, even as a retiree, because I'm still a professional. These are the words I keep in mind when I define myself. The pro is proactive rather than reactive. A pro progresses in thought, word, and deed. A pro is profound, penetrating, never superficial. A pro is proficient in all they do, prolific in work, never profane. So you never see this sign in the professional's workplace, okay? So I've got to get rid of my background in order for you to see the sign. So excuse my junky office, but it's important enough that I gotta get rid of the virtual background, okay? None. Now, is it there yet? No, it didn't go away. Okay, let me hit it again. Change virtual background. None. It's still not going away. Oh no. Well, I'll have to read it to you then. Sorry. I really wanted to hold the sign up. All right, you ready? This place requires no physical fitness program. Everyone gets enough exercise, jumping to conclusions, flying off the handle, running down the boss, knifing friends in the back, dodging responsibility, and pushing their luck. That is definitely not the pro you want to be. Questions, please.
All right, everybody, feel free to send any questions to me that you liked in the chat to Rachel Mariano, or unmute yourself to ask. We have one question already.
Okay.
So what are some life lessons you learned working in TV?
Be more specific. And by that, I mean when you say life lessons as a reporter, life lessons as an anchor, life lessons working in the business.
Life lessons as a person in general.
The first is that we all have internal biases. And even though we as reporters always talk about not being biased, providing unbiased coverage, each of us is born with biases, depending upon where you grew up, depending upon your religion, depending upon the color of your skin, depending upon the economics. So you have to recognize what your biases are, and then what I call work around them. And that means interviewing people who are not like you. And when you approach a subject, to always be aware of your biases and to be honest with people about them, and then to raise the questions that the population in general would want to have answers to versus what people in your group would want to have answers to. You always have to ask who is affected and how will they be affected. So that means you have to get out of your middle class background sometimes, or the background you came from if you grew up, as I did in Louisville, Kentucky, in an all-Black neighborhood where you had a little interaction with white people, to then raise the question, do they understand my background and do I understand theirs? And how can we come to a place of understanding and compromise and not necessarily agreement? Does that make sense?
Yes, excellent. Somebody has asked if you could share the quotes. I was thinking maybe you could email it to us and they could email me for a copy of it. Does that sound good?
Which quotes do you want?
I think the one that you said, can you share the last quote you wanted to hold up in the chat?
Oh, the notice. Sure. What
Yeah,
I'll do is when we're finished, I will actually scan it and send it to you.
Okay, perfect. All right, everybody, I'm going to put my email in the chat. And then if you want, just reach out to me and I'll be sure to get that to you. All right, we have a question from Dummy. It said, how do you deal with or face challenges that you haven't faced before?
Ooh. It depends on what the challenge is. Let's talk about a work challenge first. I'm not going to make this person work as hard as I made the other person work. There are different challenges. Okay, first of all, let's look at work challenges. When let's go back even further. When I was in the third grade, I went to my first integrated school and I was the only Black student. So the challenge there was keeping my grades up, wanting to be a part of the group, knowing that no one wanted me to be a part of their group. So I had to develop relationships away from school that were supportive, while reminding myself that I was at school to learn and not to be everybody's friend. And it meant eating lunch by myself, which is very hard when you're 9 years old. But I was reminded by my mother that my job was to be a good student, and that in time, my friendliness by saying hello to people, speaking up in class, and being involved in after-school activities where they couldn't push me away would soon win people over. Some people you win over, some people you never win over. But what was important was for me to remain self-confident and not let other people define me. That same held true when I went to WSB in 1975 and was told I was going to be the first minority and the first woman to anchor the 6 o'clock news. There were people already at the station in positions who felt the job should have been theirs. And then there were other people who watched the channel who didn't want a person of color or a woman in the 6 o'clock news because 4 white men had always been in that position. So again, I had support from the outside through my church, through my volunteer activities, and I had support on the inside because they wouldn't have hired me for the job if they didn't think I could do the job. So there's an inner strength that comes from having a support system outside and also having activities outside that provides you with a release. At that time, I played a lot of tennis and I named the balls and I would hit them just like I was hitting, like I'd like to hit some of those viewers. I could not please Black viewers and I couldn't please white viewers. Black viewers wanted me to have a throw out to here, white viewers didn't want me there at all. But again, I plotted what I needed to do. Not only did I have the support from the outside, but I got involved in starting to speak at schools and starting to speak to groups who normally wouldn't have invited me to be a speaker, but because I was the anchor at Channel 2, they then would invite me. And sometimes it felt like a setup, but that setup was a perfect setup for me because it allowed me to deal with negative comments in a positive way and to show people that the button they thought they could push was unpushable. So I think conflicts, when something is new, going into it, you prepare for the worst and prepare for the best. You don't go in naively. You should always interview companies the way they interview you. And a lot of times we don't do that. So you get someplace and you find out you hate the job because there's no place for you to go. And you should always find out what the plan is for them, for you, long term, if you want to stay there long term. Challenges, remember, they're opportunities. They're not really challenges, they're opportunities. It's all how you look at it.
Excellent. So this is a comment more than a question from Monica. She says, "You are indeed an inspiration. Thanks for educating us with your wisdom and passion."
Oh, thank you.
Then we have a question. "I know it's important to connect to your purpose. Any advice on how to do that?"
How to connect with
With your purpose.
With your purpose. Well, people laugh at having a vision board, but I think you should. Don't ever let people tell you what you can't do. Your purpose. What is your purpose in life? What is the thing you love to do? The thing that, I'm still doing voiceover work because I love to do it. I'm still writing because it's something I do. So my purpose in life is to be a communicator. It always has been. My mother said when I came out of the womb, that I had this deep cry and it scared her to death. She thought that, something was wrong with her baby's voice being so low. Well, who knew that voice would in turn take me into public speaking, take me into debate, take me into writing, take me into broadcasting, and give me a lifelong career in television and radio. But I can still write for newspaper. So your purpose, you have to define it. I can't define it for you. And for me, it was communication. That's what I do. That's who I am. I'll probably die talking. That's just it. So, you have to think about what is it that makes you happy? Is it music? Is it waiting on people? And I say that for a reason. When I call companies, I love to hear the receptionist. I always go straight to the agent. I don't want to hear all of that. Push number 2, push number 3. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the person's voice. And how they answer the phone tells me a lot about them. If it's like yesterday, I was calling the Kroger company because I wanted to know why I couldn't get fuel points for something I subscribe to online, Home Chef, whereas if I buy Home Chef in the store, I get points. So anyway, the first person who came on, "How may I help you?" And I'm like, ooh, she must be having a bad day. I talked to her and it was just matter of fact. She sent me off to somebody else who might have been able. And he was, well, I really don't know. Maybe you need to talk to somebody in another department. Let me transfer you. Again, flat, no energy. Then I got to Richard, who was, and how is your day going? How can I help you? Now, what if I had been an employer? What if I had been someone looking for someone to work in my business? Richard would have been the person I would have followed up on because he cared about serving me. It's the same when I walk into a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a Chick-fil-A. The person who says, my pleasure, and the person who says, it's my pleasure, is different. How you treat me, how you respond to me, no matter what position you're in, could lead to another position. So if you love what you're doing, even if it's not where you want to be ultimately, you're gaining skills that will help you be the best you when you get to where you want to be. It's all practice. So your purpose, while you're still defining it, you should still be the person I would want to hire. How do you feel when you go into a restaurant and the person walks up to you? Hi, I'm Louise. Today the specials are, how can I help you? You never see them again until they drop the plate off. And then when they drop the plate off, they don't ask, would you like anything else? They walk away. They go to another table. They don't come by and pick up the dirty dishes. Nobody else does. The only time they come over again to see you is to drop your check. And then it's thank you for being here and goodbye. Or you're waiting in line and no one says to you, I'll be with you in a moment. We're a little busier than usual. I'm sorry. Takes control of a situation to make that person who's using your services feel as if they're a person of value and worth. But your purpose comes from your love, what you want to do. Maybe you want to be a social worker. Maybe you want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you want to work in the medical field. And sometimes the only way to find out those things is to volunteer. I once thought I wanted to be a doctor until I spent a summer working at Louisville General Hospital as a volunteer and quickly learned I did not want to deal with what happens in an emergency room, that too much blood will make me pass out. Can't do it. So sometimes you have to volunteer in your area to see if it's really what you want. Interview people who are in the positions you think you might want to do. And when it comes to finding your purpose, it's who you are. Question yourself. Write a list of things that make you wonderful, the things you're good at, what your friends say about you. And then what is your vision for your life? What are the things you want to accomplish? And then how do you go about doing it? My mama used to say all the time, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So your purpose, I can't define it for you. You have to work on it yourself. And the problem is most of us don't want to get that introspective. We don't really want to know who we are, our failures, our strengths, the things that drive us crazy. Your purpose. You know what your purpose is. It's just you're not sure how to go about getting to it. And your purpose could be more than one. My purpose on the job was to be the best communicator I could be and to get viewers to watch Channel 2. My purpose off the job was to spend time reading to children and giving them books, because to me, reading is fundamental. And the more I could help children in elementary school learn to read well and to appreciate books, that later on will pay off with them going into careers, hopefully, that they've read about, people they like to emulate. And also that reading will help them pass that SAT. Those reading skills will even help them get a driver's license. So I believe in starting early. So for 10 years, I read to first graders in the Atlanta public school system for every week, and I loved it. And that was my purpose, because education literally is your path to the future and your path to success. So that was my other purpose.
And a shout out to all the students who donated books this week. We just donated over 500 books to Leaders
Congratulations.
Initiative for Head Start. So all the students who donated, thank you for supporting that important initiative. So
Now you need to go back and read to them.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we have a question from Isis Scott Campbell. She said, what motivated you to break through so many barriers?
Well, you don't know you're breaking barriers when you do it. I did not, when they interviewed me for the job at Channel 2, they didn't tell me that I could, it finally hit me when I saw the guys up there, but it didn't hit me. And I was just going about doing my job. And I think that's the important thing. You don't worry about breaking barriers. You just go about doing you, being the professional that you are. And if that opens doors, then that's wonderful, but it all starts with education. I'm thinking of Roz Brewer. Roz Brewer graduated from Spelman College. Roz Brewer has been the CEO of Walmart, and she's now just recently was named Fortune 500 CEO. And she's the first African-American woman to be named a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I think it's Walgreens. I may be wrong. I think it's Walgreens.
It's Walgreens.
Yeah, it is Walgreens. That's what I thought. So, look at her. I look at Valerie Montgomery Rice, who grew up in Macon, Georgia. And Valerie Montgomery Rice is the first woman president of Morehouse School of Medicine. So, I'm just naming women. There are men who have broken barriers too, but I need to remind the ladies in here that, come on, you can do it. And then you look at our vice president, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, the reality is first Asian American, first child of immigrants, first Black person to be vice president of the United States. So she wasn't thinking about that when she was running, no more than Jimmy Carter was thinking about being first president from the South in ages to become president of the United States. So I think you go after what you love. And if you break a barrier, that's wonderful, but that should not be your impetus for doing it. Because if you're just doing it to break a barrier and you don't love what you're doing, it will get to be a burden. And nothing's worse than having to go somewhere every day where you really don't want to be.
Okay, good. This question is from Miss York. That's a little bit long.
Oh, one more thing. Rachel, one more thing. And that is, when you do break barriers, don't let people pull you down by saying, oh, she only got it because, or he only got it because he's Black. She or he only got it because they needed a minority. They only got it because, they needed Hispanic or Latinx. She only got it because she's Asian. Don't let people take your glow. Remember, that's their opinion. And as my grandmother said, opinions are like, and those of you who were on earlier, you know the rest of the statement.
I love it.
And those of you who weren't,
that's wonderful advice for each of us to take with us today.
Okay, Rachel.
Okay, so this is from Ms. York. Do you have any advice regarding communicating with someone that you need to get an important message across to when seemingly they cannot hear you and are just waiting for their turn to speak?
Yes. It's called getting quiet. And sometimes when you're talking to someone, you have to look them in the eye and say, I really need to tell you something, but I'm concerned that you may not hear me because you're already thinking about your response. So let me give a sentence, and then you give a sentence. And let's go back and forth, sentence by sentence. And let's talk about what I need to tell you. And then what I always do is write it out. and then send it to them afterwards. Why? Because in the moment, usually that person is, well, I can't wait because I'm going to tell you how I feel. But in telling me how you feel, you're not telling me that you heard me. So I found that by writing things out afterwards and sending it to them, please consider, I heard what you said, but I just want to make sure you understand what I was trying to say to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do this for another reason. It's called covering your ass. Because people have a way of saying, she said this to me, or he said this to me, and I told this, and I always make sure when I have any kind of meeting where I think it's going to be that kind of situation, I write out, here's what I heard you say, here's what I'm saying, and here's why it's important for you to listen. So that if you get to the place where you have to say, hit the road, Jack or Jill, it's in writing. Now, I hope it doesn't get to that, but some people are just hard-headed. All they want to do is tell you how they feel and not listen to what you're trying to tell them. And sometimes you have to couch it in words like, you may not feel this way, but let me tell you how this affects the operation of the newsroom. I know you're concerned, but please listen to my concern. How would you handle this if someone did this? In other words, incorporate them into the discussion by sometimes raising questions that make them have to think versus giving your speech and then they react. Does that make sense? Did that help the person who asked that question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much, Ms. Pearson. I appreciate it.
But always follow it up with an email because people forget what was said during the meeting because sometimes they're so emotional, they don't hear a thing you're saying. So I always follow up with an email. Plus, I always believe in having a paper trail. I'm sorry. That comes from years of working.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So this is from Dr. Waddell, and she says, what advice can you give students to encourage them to participate in college organizations?
Well, here's the problem. I don't know how many of the people on this chat are working too. It's hard to work and go to school and be involved in activities. I know that because I dropped out of college in my sophomore year, got married, got a full-time job, then went back to school with a full-time job and a family. It's really hard to give that extra time. So what I finally did, because I understood the importance of having some volunteer things on my resume, was I picked one organization to work with. And that organization was usually one that I could also incorporate my husband into on weekend activities. I also would look for things that could be done while I'm at school versus things that require time after school or before school. It's hard to be involved in school activities when you are carrying a full load of work, family, and school. So I say be careful what you pick. Let's say you want to be in the journalism area, then you could work for the college newspaper. Or like you did the books, you collected books, then maybe you could put together a group that would go speak to, read to kids, and you do that on your schedule, not on, quote, the organization schedule, but you then put in, I read such and such to this school on this day. Look for those college, those Gwinnett Tech activities that fit into your schedule, because that's a way of getting to know other people there, but it's also a way to build relationships for when you go into the workforce that you can call on that person and say, hey, I have an employee I think would be great for your company. And they could turn to you and say, hey, we've got a job opening over here. Why don't you come talk to us? So yes, please be involved, but be involved according to your workload, class load, and energy load. It's hard. I think Dr. Waddell understands that.
All right, we have so many questions rolling in, but to be respectful of your time, I know you're in the middle of judging a big competition. We'll just do one last question.
Well, do four more. Do four
Okay.
more. I'll take
How
four
many
more. Four more, and then we're done.
Four more. Okay. So this is from Shauna. She says, I am a huge fan. Thank you for being here. Her question is, how do you overcome your weakness in the workplace? For example, my weakness is thinking emotionally rather than logically.
Oh, wow. At least you know it. That's the first step. That's
Yes,
the
ma'am.
first step. You recognize it.
Yes.
So who is the person at work that you would consider a mentor? Do you have a mentor at work?
Actually, I do have a mentor. My mentor, she was actually my regular at a restaurant that I worked at, but now she has become my mentor. She's a judge. She's a Navy federal judge.
So why don't you ask her the very same question you asked me? Because guess what? She'll give you some answers in a way. I'll give you my answers, but she's going to be, believe it or not, because she knows you, she is going to be able to connect to you better than ever I can. But here's how I deal with it.
Got it.
I learned a long time ago, you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, but sometimes you need to use vinegar, but you need to know when to use the vinegar. I have learned if I feel a warmth coming into my body, that's the only way to describe it. When someone says something or does something that rubs me the wrong way and that could cause me to become Monica from Smoketown versus well-educated Monica, I sit back and I take a deep breath and I listen and I look. And sometimes I will even have to leave the situation. If it's a person who I work with who has said something that is hurtful, harmful, and if that person is one who will listen and is not someone who will immediately be defensive, I would a day later, after I've calmed down and thought it through, go to them and say, can we talk for a minute? And just say, yesterday you said something that was really hurtful. And I've done this before myself with people I've worked with. You said something that was really hurtful. And I know you didn't mean it, but I just needed to let you know what it was for your growth and for mine. You want to tear up? Go to the restroom and tear up. Don't you dare tear up right there. Because they will then use that against you. The time to be emotional is on the tennis court, on the golf course, in the ladies' room, in the men's room, in your car, talking to your spouse. It's not on the job. You have to use self-control. When you don't go off on your parents, you like to, but as a kid, remember you were a kid, you want to go off on your parents, you knew if you did, what would happen. It's the same thing in the place of work. It's kind of like they're there, internalize, think it through, and come back. And also put it in your diary. And we'll talk about that on another time.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but really talk to your mentor, because she knows you well, and she also probably knows who sets you off and why they set you off. And she can help you build a chain, as I call it, of things to go through so that you don't lose it. Because when you lose it, they're in control of you. You want to be in control of you.
Right.
Don't let folks get you down. Come back and deal with them later when you can be logical, and go point by point so that there is no chance of them saying, oh, I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. How would you feel if I said this to you? How would you feel if someone treated your daughter this way? What would be your course of action if someone did this? Why was it necessary to address me that way? But talk to your mentor. She knows you best. That's how I do it. I had his name will never be mentioned, but I had an anchor man who used to spend a lot of time screaming at staff, telling them how bad their writing was. Even on the set while we were doing things, we were reading, he would be typing furiously, making noise, and in the commercial breaks, saying horrible things about a reporter's report. Well, what was that supposed to do? That was supposed to get me off my game. So I learned to be laser focused because I realized what was important is for the viewers to know I had invested my time in them and that I was not going to let him pull me off my game. So I ignored him. And it got to the point where viewers, I would turn to him and I would be friendly to him. So you never knew that there was a problem. But he, in me being friendly to him and not responding to him in a negative way, he started trying to mess with me on air. And who looked bad? He did. And he was gone after a time, and I was still there. I refused to let other people control my attitude. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. No one can make you angry without your consent. No one can make you tearful without your consent. If you take nothing else from me today, take that Eleanor Roosevelt quote and substitute the words, because it's true. If you allow them to do those things to you, you allowed them. Okay, that was one. Question two?
Oh, okay. We need to take a moment to soak that in. That's powerful stuff. All right, this is from Chevy Vincent. How do you find that perfect work-life balance? What do you choose to say no to? And do you designate specific self-care days to get that break?
Oh, great. I have learned really well to say no, believe me. Believe me. I think of my friend LaRonda Morris, who says all the time, poor planning on your part does not necessitate an emergency on mine. I have learned to say no. Now, what do I do for myself? I have a Pilates class 2 times a week. I used to do it in person. Now I do it virtually, and I let nothing come into that time period. It is on my calendar, just like this meeting was on my calendar. Until COVID, I was treating myself to a facial once a month and a manicure and pedicure every 2 weeks. Now I'm doing self manicures and pedicures. Every other day, which is Tuesday, and I've already done it this morning, Thursday and Sunday, I walk at the park near me. I get 2.25 miles in. Again, no one interrupts that time. I love to cook, but I don't like to grocery shop. So I do Home Chef, because Home Chef delivers all of my groceries to me on Monday. They give me the recipes for all the meals that are in there. It costs me $130 a week. That's 4 meals, 12 meals. Well, actually, it's more than that, because I get it 5 days a week. So that's 20 meals for 4 people. And all I have to do is whip it up in the evening, because I love to cook. But again, it used to be, I felt like I had to go to the grocery store and I had to do a grocery list and I had to do this. No. Home Chef is delivered every Monday. When I have to go to the grocery store, I get on my Kroger card and I type it in and I pick it up. I have learned to take care of me, because Kroger's free. You spend over $35, it's free. You just drive over there, they put it in your car, and you're gone. And I think Walmart's the same way. But I have learned how to allow myself to relax. I meditate every morning, read my Bible every morning before I get out of the bed, because if I put my feet out of the bed, something will interrupt. So I just reach over, grab the Bible, the daily word, read it, and then I get up and I do my stretches. In other words, I'm taking care of me, and I don't care. I do not take this thing, the phone, into the bathroom. And at night, it is in my closet and not next to my bed. Because anything that happens after midnight, I can't do anything about it until the next morning anyway. Okay? So, yes, I make time for me, and you should make time for you and not feel guilty. My husband washes his own clothes. He always has. He was single, he washed his clothes then, so he washes them now. We split up the duties, and that's important. There's some days, like on Sundays, because we only do home chef Monday through Friday. John will cook on Sunday. He has a green egg. He's famous for his lamb chops and his steaks. So I let him do it. Why do I have to cook every day? We split up our responsibility. We have a 90-year-old in the house, his mother. And so we have a woman who comes in 2 days out of the week so that I can do what I need to do on those other days. So I think the importance, when you say a work-life balance, you're always juggling. But I have learned to make sure I'm a priority. And that's good for me. It's good for my husband. It's good for my mother-in-law. It's good for my daughter. I used to be one of those mothers. If my daughter called me, I would stop on a dime. Unless she's in an emergency, it's like, I'll call you back, Claire, I'm busy. Or I will text her. That's what she does with me. That's who I learned it from. That's who I learned it from. So be good to yourself and don't feel guilty about it.
Okay, good. All right, question number 3. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Not to get married until I became who I became. And I'm very serious about that, y'all. I am so serious about that. Because, here's that personal story that that I had to learn the hard way, and I don't want you to do it. Now, y'all are different. I was a good Catholic girl, so I got married the first time at the age of 18 so I could have sex. Little did I know you can have sex without being married, but that was important to me as part of my faith. I was married for 8 years, and then I was offered, I got a job, to eventually got a job in TV, and he wouldn't move. And my mother said, good jobs are a lot harder to find than good men. So I took the job. But the reality is that was a bad decision to get married so young. And, I'm not proud of it, but I married a second time because I was ready to have kids. Wrong. So here I am now at the age of 73, finally in a wonderful, loving, shared marriage because we both are adults. And had I waited and become the person that I was meant to be, that my purpose was to be in communications, because I worked on my high school newspaper, worked on my college newspaper, did radio and television as a teenager. Had I followed that, I would have been much further along, not only in my work life, but also in my marriage life. So my biggest mistake was getting married before I knew who I was and what my purpose really was. They're going to be there. She's going to be there. If she's not, then she wasn't the one for you. He's going to be there. If he's not, he wasn't the one for you. My mother used to say this. My mother was full of sayings, and one of these days I'm going to write that book. She said, if men are like buses. If you miss one, another one's going to come along. Women are like buses. If you miss one, another one's going to come along. And when you go into a relationship, I hate to say this, But water seeks its own level. That's not to say you can't date someone who is not who's not in the same financial bracket you're in. You look at what their purpose is and you look at where they're going. For instance, my husband is a police officer. And people look at me and say, "You're married to a man in law enforcement?" Yes, he was in law enforcement. John didn't graduate from college until we got married because I kept my foot up his behind and said, "You're smart, you've done well in your career, but you're not going to go any further until you get that degree." And he went back to school and got his degree. You have to look for people who have purpose. It's not about education always. It's not about money. It's about where are they going and how are they getting there? If somebody wants you to take care of them, we got a problem. And that goes for you men too. You know, you got to look at women. If she's just wanting to be an art piece, you don't need that. You need somebody who's going to work with you to be a couple, a successful marriage, a relationship. You can work together and stay together. And the only way that happens is if you research the people you date the way you go about jobs. You know, y'all all into how cute he is or how cute she is and what a great body he has and those bodies change. And that flat stomach soon becomes another one of my mother's favorite sayings, a shed over a tool. So you have to look at more than what you see. You got to be inside. So I would say the biggest mistake I made was wanting to get married and have sex versus becoming the person that I was to be. Don't rush. As my mama used to say, don't rush life. Don't rush life.
Okay, thank you. So our last question, this is about you. It says, how has your transition from being an anchor been?
It has been fabulous. People ask me all the time, don't you miss being on television? I'm still on television, only I'm doing commercials for Montlick. I'm doing something that I couldn't do when I was anchoring. Do I miss the news? The only time I miss doing the news is during election season. I love covering politics, so I miss it then. But I still have the opportunity to do that on radio for WSB Radio. But no, I don't. When I walked away, I was happy to walk away because I had another purpose in life, and that purpose was to communicate in another way. So now I'm doing voiceover work, which I love. It's very competitive. I don't always get the jobs that I apply for, and that's teaching me how to deal with rejection. And that's good. So I'm still growing. So I don't miss the news at all, except during politics. But other than that, this is me. I love the new me. I'm doing what I want to do versus what I have to do. And that to me is success. Yeah. So I miss my comrades, you know, like this summer, Glenn Burns, Chuck Dowdle, John Pruitt, and I, our families, are all going to Maine. Chuck has a house in Maine, and all 8 of us are going up. Well, 12 of us are going up there, and we are going to have a ball. We're going to eat lobster and talk and giggle and lie and have fun.
Well,
You got to know when to go.
thank you, Monica. Melvin Everson, I first met you at Sugarloaf Country Club when you and your current husband now there with Bruce Lavelle. And when you retired, I want to confess here, my wife cried because you were one of her favorites. She loved watching you on the news. And thank you for everything. You probably don't remember, but you interviewed me down at the Capitol when I was a state rep, and you and Javita Moore. And Javita Moore was taking over the anchorship from you. And that's when I first met you. Great
Well,
job.
it's a pleasure. Thank you. And I just saw Bruce the other day. He was fixing a watch for me. You know,
Yes.
Bruce is a good friend,
Yes.
but we can't talk politics.
I know.
because he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat.
I know.
So we don't talk politics because we want to maintain the friendship.
Yeah.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to all of you. If any of you have other questions, you can always email me because I still have an email at Channel 2. It's just monica.pearson@cmg.com. Monica.pearson, Pearson, that's Cox M Media G Group.com. And I will get to you, I'll respond to you. It's probably going to be late at night when I respond, but I will respond.
Well, Monica, I think I could say on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for speaking with us today. There's just something so refreshing about hearing your voice. And I think we all took something valuable from this meeting that will enrich our professional and personal lives. Definitely a lot of little nuggets in there. I think your message was right on time today. So it was an honor. And we appreciate you for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you all for having me. It was such a pleasure. Let's hope when we speak again, we can do this in person, okay?
For sure, for sure. I got your email now, so, oh yeah.
Please email me. It is not a problem. I love doing it. And as you see, I'm free. People always say, well, what do you charge? You all are giving me a stipend that I'm going to give to charity. So thank you.
I'll read one last comment that somebody wrote. She said, listening to inspiring speakers makes me happy. Thank you, Monica, for making me happy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you so much, Monica, for your time today. We certainly appreciate you very, very much.
Bye-bye.